Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is Dr. Amy Saltzman. Dr. Amy Saltzman is a holistic MD, mindfulness coach, and abuse prevention expert. She founded the website spotaspider.com, and you can find out more about Dr. Amy Saltzman and her very important work preventing abuse in children at spotaspider.com. Welcome, Dr. Amy Saltzman.
I'm so glad to be here with you this morning.
So, Dr. Amy Saltzman, what led you to create spotaspider.com?
Okay, well, this is a little bit of a story. I'll try to keep it short. I was a gymnast as a child. I began a relationship with a life coach when I was 25, and continued that relationship for 31 years. And in January of 2020, I asked to complete the coaching relationship. At that point, really thinking that I would graduate or complete, and then we would resume a relationship in some other form. At that time, knowing what I know now, I realized that the coach intensified her decades-long gaslighting of me. And specifically, she began to tell me that I had Alzheimer's or some other serious neuropsychological condition, or that I was resisting my personal and spiritual growth. And honestly, the latter felt worse than the former. And I held my ground more or less, although I will say I did get reeled back in over and over, and which I now see was a pattern over 31 years. But at some point, she had the hubris to insist that I needed a neuropsychological evaluation. And I believe that she believed that she would not only convince the neuropsychologist that I was resisting the coaching, but that she would convince the neuropsychologist that the coaching was in my best interest. And so what happened is I did the full $7,000 neuropsychological assessment. That meant 7 hours of me doing all these crazy memory tests and word interpretations and what does this phrase mean. And then the neuropsychologist talked to the coach for 2 hours, because at this point, although I didn't realize I was trying to leave an abusive relationship, I was trying to leave. But at the same time, I still believe she had my best interests at heart. And the neuropsychologist talked to my husband for an hour. At the end of the final assessment, the determination was that the relationship was a relationship of undue influence. And the moment that the neuropsychologist said that, it was as if the light had shifted. And I saw the entire spider's web of abuse in that moment. And as part of my healing, I created How to Spot a Spider, because I want to teach people, particularly young, vulnerable children, with a focus on athletes, but this really applies to students, musicians, people on debate team, people in theater, people going to the YMCA, or whatever the UK equivalent of that is. And so I created this program to help people recognize what we normally call grooming. And I want to say a note on that, and then I'll be quiet and let you ask me the next question. But when we think about grooming, we tend to think about it as something that leads to abuse. And usually we're thinking it leads to sexual abuse. And while that is true, grooming is actually covert emotional abuse. And whether it leads to any other kind of abuse or not, it is abusive. And the data actually indicate that covert emotional abuse is more likely to lead to dissociation and PTSD than overt emotional abuse, overt physical abuse, or overt sexual abuse. And the reason for this is because when people are abused by sneaky spiders, they come to doubt themselves and doubt their own reality.
Thank you. So, Dr. Saltzman, what exactly is the purpose of spotaspider.com?
So the purpose is really to help parents educate and empower their children to recognize abusive behaviors. And there are two videos. One is how to spot a sneaky spider, which goes through all the patterns a sneaky spider weaves to groom or covertly emotionally abuse children. And the second video is how to spot an obvious spider. And it goes into detail on what is obvious emotional abuse, and particularly in sports or schools or high performing environments like music programs or ballet. We parents often tolerate abuse, or the children participants tolerate abuse because we think that it is going to allow us to achieve our dreams. And so we let coaches, teachers, music teachers get away with behavior that normally we wouldn't allow in a classroom. So, but I want kids to be able to recognize and name the behaviors. And then specifically, it goes through very specifics. What is emotional abuse, both verbal and nonverbal? What is physical abuse, both with physical contact and without physical contact? And then what is sexual abuse? And I use correct anatomical terms for that because the data shows that people who feel comfortable using correct anatomical terms are more likely to speak up and protect themselves from abuse.
So this is so important. And if you are listening to this and you recognize that you are a victim of abuse in any way, please reach out to help. In the US, you can look for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And in my work as a medical intuitive, and I have to, give this background. So many people who are suffering from chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, a lot of what's going on with them is they've got all this stuck trauma in their body. And a lot of chronic depression and chronic anxiety all goes back to abuse that people have experienced throughout their lives. So one of the resources that I frequently point to people, to my clients in my work as a medical intuitive healer, is what is referred to as the wheel of power and control. And as Dr. Saltzman, I'm sure, can agree with me, when you're being abused, a lot of times it's very difficult to face the fact that you're being abused. So the wheel of power and control points out 8 possible ways that you could be the victim of power and control. Physical abuse and sexual abuse, of course, is part of it, but it's not all of it. So let me sort of go through it before we go back to Dr. Saltzman, some of the ways that you may be experiencing abuse.
And would it work for you if it's tied to something in Spot a Spider or something in my own experience if I comment after each one?
Absolutely. All right. So the first is using coercion and threats. Anything to add, Dr. Saltzman?
Yes. So I just want to expand on that, because really, and this is explained in How to Spot a Sneaky Spider, really, it's not just using coercion and threats, it's using your hopes and your fears. So an abusive coach, athletic coach, or life coach will tell you, I am here to help you make your dreams come true. And if you're in an abusive domestic situation, it's, I am here, to help your family life dreams come true. And then the second piece is, without me, your dreams will never come true. And it's the carrot and the stick.
Right. Now, the next one is using intimidation. So Dr. Saltzman comments about using intimidation.
Yeah, I think especially, when it's a relationship adult to adult, and some people would have said I was an adult when I started my relationship with my coach. That's one thing. But with children and adults, the power, the imbalance in power and the intimidation is kind of already baked into the relationship. And then again, if this is a program where either the child or the parent feels that the program's going to help them achieve the dreams, that bakes in another layer of intimidation on top of that.
Using emotional abuse. Okay, so emotional abuse could be putting you down, making you think you're crazy, playing mind games, humiliating you, making you feel guilty. Dr. Saltzman.
Yes, all of the above. This is perfect because we're basically going through the things in Spot a Spider. And the thing I want to emphasize about Spot a Spider is I have really translated all these adult concepts into material that children can absorb and understand. And maybe not give back completely, but enough to say, mom, dad, school counselor, I think something might be going on here. That's really all they need to be able to say. So all of the tactics that you mentioned are true. But what I want to say about sneaky spiders is they're very, very subtle. And it might be something as simple as maybe you don't have what it takes, or your fear is holding you back, when really the person's having healthy concern about an abusive relationship. But what they're being told is, you're not trusting me enough to achieve your dreams. So it's not, the sneaky, covert emotional abuse is not the yelling, you're a freaking idiot, why can't you pass the ball? It's quiet, it's subtle, it's insidious.
The next one is using isolation, controlling what you do, who you see, who you talk to, what you read, limiting outside involvement. Dr. Saltzman.
Absolutely. So abusive spiders want to separate and isolate their victim, or victims, plural. And they do that by subtly diminishing, attacking, judging other people. So I'm going to use some sports examples now, but if a teammate is saying, I don't think what the coach is doing is right, the coach is going to say, that teammate has a bad attitude, they're in a bad headspace, stay away from that teammate. If a child's parents are raising concerns about the coach will say, well, your parents don't understand what it takes to be great, and your parents' doubts and fears are holding you back. And I know you're special. Your parents don't understand. They can't support you in the way that I can support you. So now the child has doubts about their parents. If an assistant coach raises questions, the coach will say, the abusing coach will say, that coach doesn't know what they're talking about, or they're just an assistant, or don't listen to them. And if it's within their power, they will have that coach, the assistant coach, fired. Because sneaky spiders are terrified that people will see the web. And so they want to make sure that anyone who sees a thread or a pattern, if I see a thread or a pattern and you see a thread or a pattern, they want to make sure that you and I aren't talking and aren't comparing notes, because once we do that, then we see the web, then we know they're a spider, then we're empowered to take action. So if your child's in a situation where there's like an in group and an out group and a favorites and a group of people who are disgruntled, and often in athletics, it's like, well, they're not happy with their playing time, or they can't handle the training load, but it's creating wedges at every level.
The next is minimizing, denying, and blaming. So this would be making light of the abuse, saying that the victim caused the abuse and it's their fault. Dr. Saltzman.
Yes, and this might be a great point to mention the other resources on my webpage. So there's a page on the webpage called resources. And at the very bottom is an article titled Ending Cycles of Abuse in Sports and Society. And I go through more examples than we're going to be able to go through today about how this shows up in sports, and there are parallels in entertainment, etc. And so they will often say, I didn't say that, I didn't do that, you're misremembering, that's not what happened, that's also gaslighting. And they will often justify their behavior by saying, oh, I only want what's best for you. I only want to make you your best. And if you think of this in terms of like domestic abuse, the patterns are the same. In terms of all the behaviors that you've mentioned so far.
Now we're going back to the wheel of power control, and another one, and this is in domestic abuse, domestic violence, is using children. So Dr. Saltzman.
One of the ways that an abusive parent can cause the most heart-wrenching damage to the loving victim parent is to turn the children against them. And it doesn't happen when you say you're leaving. It doesn't happen when you file for divorce. This is a pattern that, whether you know it or not, has been going on all throughout the abusive parent-child relationship. And again, it is these subtle things of your mom doesn't love and understand you the way I do.
And the next one is using male privilege. So this would be acting like the master of the castle, treating other people like servants, being the one to define men and women's roles. So Dr. Saltzman.
Okay, so I'm going to agree with the concept and disagree with a word.
Yes.
Because my abuse was by a female. So the behavior patterns are correct. So I would say using privilege or unquestionable authority. I would take the word mal out of it, because while we tend to think, and I think statistics support that abuse is more often perpetrated by males, we need to recognize that there are abusive females as well. So the pattern, yes, the terminology could be corrected.
And the last in the wheel of power control is using economic abuse. So this would be controlling money, taking their money. Dr. Saltzman.
There's controlling money, there's taking money, and there's also, like in my case, from a my life coach was just demanding that I pay more and more money. And then another favorite tactic of hers was to, if I balked at the increasing fees, was either to say I was hung up on money, I was stingy, or I was resisting my personal growth. But basically the idea in, oh, I do not want to use this word. I'm going to put it in quotes. In a professional relationship is, demanding increasing payments. So like if you look at a lot of cult groups or MLMs or whatever, this is the same tactic.
So in my work as a medical intuitive healer, when I'm working with people who I know are being abused, I point them to the wheel of power and control, and I ask them to look at the 8 different areas that Dr. Amy Saltzman and I just discussed, and journal about and acknowledge to yourself what you've actually experienced. Now, Dr. Amy Saltzman, do you have any precautions for listeners interested in holistic health and well-being?
Oh, what a great question, and not one I expected on this topic. But I think one of the things that's been most concerning to me lately is that there is a lot in the wellness industry that has become abusive. So yoga groups, life coaching, self-help, spiritual growth. I think the cautions are, you want to know how the person was trained, and you want to know that they belong to a group with a code of ethics. And my coach was neither. And I'll give you, Catherine, a link to a beautiful piece that I think comes out of Australia about, it's such an exquisitely constructed spiritual code of ethics, but you want your practitioner, whoever it is, to be bound by a code of ethics. And one reason I think a lot of these health and wellness sectors are prone to abuse is, at least in the US, there's no licensing, there's no body holding people accountable, and there's no code of ethics. And so if you are a person who wants to abuse people, these sectors are the perfect places to set up shop.
And with that, let's take a break and listen to one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio, and we'll be right back. This is Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer. You've been listening to Dr. Amy Saltzman, abuse prevention expert. Dr. Amy Saltzman, so your work is about empowering parents to protect their children from being abused. And nowadays, with the internet and parents not really knowing all the social media sites that their children are going to, what can parents do to discuss abuse with their children, especially if they feel awkward or reluctant to talk about types of abuse, including sexual abuse with their children?
So I will say that that's exactly why I created Spot a Spider. Parents don't feel equipped to have these conversations, and they may feel intimidated, embarrassed, reluctant. However, I promise you that no matter how intimidated, embarrassed, or reluctant or awkward you think watching these videos and having discussions with your children may be, and there are specific discussions questions under the resource section for each video, so you don't feel like you have to go into it unguided. However awkward you think that conversation will be, it will not be anywhere near as awkward or as painful or as heart-wrenching as having the conversation after your child has been abused. So just keep that in mind and in heart. This is health, safety, and well-being, right? Like we have sex ed and driver's ed and drug education. This is abuse education. You want your child to be educated. You want your child to know that if they have any concern, because if they have concern, they've had to overcome their inherent trust in adults, the situation and the imbalance of power to even speak it. So you want them to know that if they have any concern, they can come and speak to you, and that you will listen and that you will believe them. And all you need to say to them is, I'm here for you. And then if they start disclosing things, tell me more. And if you feel like you don't have enough support to have the conversation, then it's time to reach out for professional support. Deep breath. Particularly from someone who understands coercive control and covert emotional abuse, or understands sexual abuse, if that's what your child's reporting. And you want that person to be not just trauma informed, but trauma sensitive.
I was just reading a news article recently about a young man who committed suicide. And what had happened to him was that he had been contacted by a group of abusers who had sent him naked photographs of a young woman and convinced him to send naked photographs of himself. And then they threatened him and demanded money. When he didn't have enough money, he committed suicide. Why is it so critical, Dr. Amy Saltzman, for children to be able to spot and stop sneaky spiders?
Well, I think you're talking about two things, and I want to spot a spider. The videos cover things like sexting or sexual texts with or without photos, etc. And we, there's probably a whole nother conversation on spotting social media abuse.
Mm-hmm.
I had an athlete who had a similar thing happen, and what they did was threaten his scholarship, that they were going to go to the coach.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do want to also be teaching our kids safe social media use, and when to tell your parents, Mom, I'm receiving texts, they want me to send this, what should I do? And then usually that involves, unfortunately, changing your social media, changing your phone numbers, etc. But that's what needs to happen.
So why is it so important to teach our children to spot and stop sneaky spiders?
The short answer is because otherwise they'll be abused. And the longer answer is that abuse has dramatic, lifelong consequences. And you and I, in our health professional roles, recognize that it has physical, emotional, mental, spiritual consequences that can be avoided. And not only can they be avoided, but the kids can come out feeling empowered. I understand all types of abuse. I am empowered to protect myself from all types of abuse. I did spot and stop a sneaky spider from not only from abusing me, but from abusing other people as well.
So, and with that, let's take a break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors. This is Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, here with Dr. Amy Saltzman, abuse prevention expert. Dr. Amy Saltzman, here at the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I interview experts like yourself from all over the world about natural healing. And I've done 2 interviews with a gentleman named H.G. Tudor, who is a self-identified narcissist, and he teaches people about narcissists. Can you describe for our audience what are the behaviors of what you call sneaky spiders, and how are they similar to the behaviors people will find in the average narcissist?
Okay, so I want to first say that narcissism is kind of being sliced and diced, and often there's a modifier that comes before narcissist. So malignant, covert, and traumatizing narcissist is what I want to talk about, because what we normally think of as a narcissist is someone who's very overt, who's bragging, who's obviously belittling and demeaning, who's obviously my way or the highway. But what's much harder to spot is the malignant, covert, traumatizing narcissist. And the way I explain it in Sneaky Spider, because when I did test readings of Sneaky Spider with groups of children, one of the questions was, why do people become sneaky spiders? And I thought that's a great question. So I'll answer it in the video, and I'll answer it here. And the best work I know about this is by a person named Dan Shaw, who has a book out called Traumatizing Narcissist, and then it has some long subtitle I can't remember. Relational Systems of Subjugation and Control might be the subtitle. But essentially, most narcissists were raised by narcissists or abusive parents themselves. They were told when they were young children, not told specifically, but implicitly, that their needs and desires were not important. And at some point, some of those people, not all of them, but some of them decide that they no longer are going to seek their parents' love, but they're going to kind of insulate and protect themselves, and they're going to seek power. So the narcissist's goal in this situation is they never want to be dependent, because that was so traumatizing to them as a child. So their goal is to make others dependent on them. And so their intention is to have power over, and they're looking for power over because they didn't have love. And I want to be clear that not every person who was abused as a child or raised by a narcissist as a child ends up to be a traumatizing narcissist. And a lot of people do the work to heal their childhood wounds. And usually if they do that, they go on to be of great service to humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So can you describe the behaviors of these sneaky spiders, these malignant, covert, and traumatizing narcissists? How do they act so that our kids and our parents can identify them?
So I think the one thing that we've left out, or that the wheel of power left out, is the very first stage. And that's the love bombing stage and the charming stage. So they will tell you you're awesome, you're amazing, you're the best student, gymnast, violinist they've ever seen. And honestly, who doesn't want to hear that? And so it's very seductive, but it's not sincere, and it is intended to manipulate. And then the next step is if you begin to push back because you're seeing the other patterns, or you're having doubts, or the love bombing is just feeling a little over the top, they'll be charming to reassure you. Oh, this, there's no need for you to worry. I only want what's best for you. I'm just here to help you be your best. And if those two tactics work, they never need to resort to the bullying, the separating, the other behavioral patterns of sneaky spiders. As long as the victim is being compliant and obedient, then, and dependent, they don't need to go to the other behaviors. So if love bombing keeps working, they'll just love bomb.
Now, for our audience, I want to share a technique from my work as a medical intuitive healer that will help you spot these sneaky spiders that Dr. Saltzman describes, the malignant, covert, traumatizing narcissist. So follow me if you will. So this is something that I teach people to do, because when you are with a highly manipulative individual, they don't want you to see who they really are, right? That's part of their tactic, is they're manipulating you to think that they're awesome. So here's what you do. You go into meditation and you visualize yourself in a holy place, such as a church, a synagogue, or a mosque, a holy place. And you visualize your soul there in that holy place with the soul of the person that you're suspicious about. And what you do is, as you do this visualization, you look around the corners, because these individuals that, again, Dr. Saltzman describes as sneaky spiders, they're going to be hiding their shadow. They're going to be hiding the parts of themselves that they don't want you to see, because they don't want you to know how controlling and abusive they really are. So you visualize yourself and your soul in this holy place with the soul of the other person, and you look around the corners, you peek behind the columns, and you notice what you see. And if you see anything that is uncomfortable or scary, that's going to be an intuitive message that the person that you're dealing with is not who they present themselves to be. And that's a technique that any parent can do with their own soul on behalf of their child. And it's a very simple way that anyone can see the shadow side of someone who may be manipulating you. So Dr. Saltzman, any comments about that technique?
Oh boy, let's see if I can go through my comments in order, because I was having thoughts as you were going. So the first thing I think I want, and then I have a question for you, but the first thing I want to say is, I think your audience is a particular audience that's super comfortable with this. But for those of you who might not be as comfortable, I think it's also just listening to the whispers or the questions, or that doesn't seem right, or wait, she's supposed to be super honest, but she's lying, or she's distorting reality, or whatever it is. The other thing I want to say is, for those who have been abused in a religious setting, that instruction might be super difficult. And so if you're open to those instructions, I would also include nature as a place because for many people, their religious settings were not safe places. They protected abusers. They allowed the shadows to accumulate until it filled the whole institution. So choose your sacred space wisely. And yeah, I'm curious if you have any other suggestions for people who were abused in a religious or a spiritual way, because I know that for me, one of the hardest parts of my abuse was my coach was my spiritual teacher. At some point I called her my oracle. And so reclaiming my spirituality and what's true for me when it was so intertwined with her has been brutal.
Great question. And I appreciate you asking me this. So one thing is, and I'm a medical intuitive healer, 30 years experience full time. So I don't want to be a guru. And
Which is a warning sign for sure.
Exactly. Anytime anybody puts themselves up as a guru, if you're in any situation, especially a professional situation where the other person puts themselves above you, that is basically wrong. It's an imbalance of power, and you want to be with practitioners who empower you.
Right. And I mean, this is just a fascinating thing, but for me, there were days where my coach would say, "Oh, I'm not a guru. I'm just a humble servant, blah, blah, blah." So you want to watch that slipperiness, but she never said, like, she never really objected to when I called her my guru or my oracle or whatever. And she actually asked me to promote that out in the world. So you want to watch for like the double speak.
Yes. I'm a longtime yoga teacher, and the yoga community is rife with this, and it leads to a lot of sexual abuse. The next part of my answer to your original question is the only person you ever have to trust is actually yourself. And part of empowering others is to teach people, how do you trust yourself? And, one way to practice trusting yourself is to get by yourself with your journal and ask yourself several basic questions. What do I know? What do I feel? And ask yourself to go within. What do I know about myself? What do I know about my truth? And how do I feel? And as you hold on to what you know and what you feel and what you perceive, then you can use your own natural inner guidance system to be guided towards the people who will empower you and away from people who are trying to take power away from you.
So I want to say two things about that just from my personal experience.
Yes.
My coach, spiritual teacher, would have said that she did want to empower me. That was like one of her big selling points. And because of that, I would have said she wanted to empower me. And so that became my truth. So actually, the sneaky spider process is eroding your trust in yourself and your knowing of your truth. And in my case, at least, it was so subtle and so patient over time that I didn't know I was being abused until the neuropsychologist uttered the phrase of undue influence. If you had asked me the day before if my coach was abusive, I would have flat out told you absolutely not.
And that brings you to my next important question, which is, what is gaslighting? How can we recognize gaslighting?
Gaslighting to me is that subtle process of not only instilling self-doubt, but making that self-doubt and your dependence and your belief in the other person primary. So one of the things I say in How to Spot a Sneaky Spider is that eventually the spiders get you to weave the web for them. So for example, again, in a sports context, it would sound something like, coach only wants me to be my best. I trust my coach. This is a great coach. I'm not sure my view of the situation is correct. Why would coach do anything to hurt me? And so there's all this doubt in yourself. So one of the things I say is, if you feel afraid of the person and afraid of leaving the person, then the person is, and dependent on the person, then the person is probably a sneaky spider.
Now, what can we as a global community do to protect our children from abuse?
So I'm going to talk specifically about the sports context, but this can, of course, be brought into any context, but I want to keep it simple and clean for now. So the first thing is that people who are hiring sports coaches can ask screening questions and have hiring guidelines. And I have those on my resources page. This would apply for a school who wants to hire teachers, a camp who wants to hire counselors, whatever it is. But they're aimed at getting at, what is this person's philosophy? Are they super charming? Do they have a personal history of abuse? What work have they done to heal their history of abuse? Can you elicit narcissistic traits in the interview? The second thing is to train any responsible adult in an organization to do holistic, positive, athlete-centered coaching. And that takes training. The next thing is to have systems to educate the families and the parents, which you could do with Spot a Spider or some other program, but to make sure that the families, parents, and staff are trained to recognize abuse. The next thing is having a code of ethics and a system for reporting. And then, honestly, we need to have laws. As a society, we need to be creating laws that are holding not only abusers, but bystanders, co-conspirators, and enablers accountable. I know somewhere in the UK, at least in domestic violence situations now, coercive control is now recognized in the legal code as a form of abuse. But in most of the world, we haven't evolved that far. So if someone's not being hit or sexually abused, as a society, we are failing to recognize the emotional abuse.
So Dr. Saltzman, final question. If someone is listening to this broadcast, we can go to Spot a Spider. Are there additional resources? If someone's listening and they recognize their child is being abused, what's the next step for a parent?
I think there's 2, maybe 3 steps. One is getting yourself and your child skilled support from someone who understands coercive control. Mm-hmm. That's first. Heal yourself first. Put on your oxygen mask first. I do not think it's fair to expect victims and people who are recovering from trauma to take on the spiders. When you're healed enough, I think it's important then to speak up if and when you're ready. And I want to say something about naming spiders. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to name my spider. So my spider's name is Georgina Lindsay. And the reason we name our spiders is to protect other people from abuse, to be a voice for people who are still healing, who feel afraid and aren't ready to speak up, to have appropriate, responsible adults hold the spiders accountable, and most importantly, to reclaim our power and demonstrate that we're free. And then after that, we need to be, lobbying to change laws, to have coercive control recognized. But the first step for a parent listening who thinks, oh no, is to reach out to me or some other professional for skilled support. And you want them to be trauma sensitive or trauma informed. And you want them to be licensed and obligated to follow ethical.
Right. And in the United States, if any practitioner is speaking or communicating with anyone under the age of 18 and they hear about abuse, they're legally required to report it to the police. So you've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. My name is Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how to heal yourself naturally. Our guest today has been Dr. Amy Saltzman. Dr. Amy Saltzman is a holistic MD, mindfulness coach, and abuse prevention expert. She is the founder of spotaspider.com. And remember, when you spot abuse and take steps to stop it, you are preventing decades of mind-body trauma and healing yourself at the very beginning. So give yourself permission to take the time to recognize when you or your child are being disempowered and potentially abused. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.